Keep watching to learn about an important whistleblower and sexual harassment case in our series of cases that made a difference.
Welcome to the YouTube channel of Michael J. Swanson. Michael is the author of How David Beats Goliath and is the CEO of Advocate Capital. And now, here's Michael.
Hello, and thanks for joining us today. In our studio via webcam today are Randall Strauss and Gary Gwilliam from Oakland, California, and they're here to tell us about an important case that they prosecuted, a tort that took many years and made a huge difference in the lives of the plaintiffs and also for society. So, guys, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
I have the pleasure of knowing the both of you for many years now. I know the important work you've done for many plaintiffs all across the country. But I've invited you here today to talk about a very special case that involved both whistleblowers and then sexual harassment and retaliation. Would you tell us about that case and how that came about?
And let me start, but I'd like to get Randy's perspective too. This is a really interesting case, Michael. It involves 6 women who, believe it or not, in 2005, in September 2005, had been observing a lot of misconduct in their local mortgage firm. They worked for a company called PNC, which was a wholly owned subsidiary of Lehman Brothers. And at that time, they were underwriters. The work they were doing was to review mortgages to make sure that they were done right. And they began to complain about that because they were on mortgages. They were making up W-2s and doing all kinds of things that were happened as the mortgages. Everybody wanted to have a mortgage in those days. And they brought in he was a sexual predator, but he was sort of the hitman to try and bring them in line to make them write up these mortgages that they were resisting on. And finally, he came up and started making a lot of sexual comments to these women. It was interesting, right? Because he really wasn't after a sexual affair with them. He was using that as a threat, as intimidation. And eventually walked up behind one of the plaintiffs, Linda Weeks, and he pressed himself up against her, and she absolutely panicked. She was a rape survivor and ran out. And that started these women who all casually knew each other, but they didn't realize they were having the same problems with writing these bad mortgages together. And we filed a lawsuit for them, as I said, in September of 2005. The case kicked around. They tried to put it in arbitration. We won that. They took an appeal. And just about the time we started to get into the case, started to take depositions, it was by then the end of 2007. And no sooner did we get really started than Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy. And it was the biggest bankruptcy in the history, not only of the United States, universe. And the case stopped. There was a stay action. And so we struggled along, thinking we'd probably never get anything out of it. So rarely do you get much out of cases that go into bankruptcy. But we hung in there. We filed bankruptcy claims that we all stated on. Randy then joined the firm, came in and started working on the case. And then things changed in 2013. Randy, why don't you tell them kind of how things went from there with the work we did to kind of move towards a settlement, since you were so actively involved in that.
Sure. Well, what's interesting to me about the case, and I'll get back to the chronology in a second, but this case involves so many issues that we see in society that are really important issues. Gary just said that they tried to put the case into forced arbitration. That is something we encounter all the time. And companies try to get their employees to waive their rights to jury trials. And this is a case where we fought that and won it in the Court of Appeal. This is a case that involves sexual harassment in the workplace. With the Me Too movement, that, of course, is something that's on everyone's radar and is a problem in our society. It's a case that involves the mortgage industry and the predatory lending institutions. So all of these were facets of this case. When I came back to the firm in 2007, started working on it, did the initial discovery, bankruptcy hit. In 2013, what happened is we were contacted by Lehman's bankruptcy counsel. And I guess they had been working their way.
2013, so now 6 years have gone by.
Correct. And during those 6 years, once the bankruptcy hit, there was not a lot we could do. We tried to get the court to release the case to go back to state court in California, and the New York judge in the bankruptcy said, no way, I'm keeping hold of this case. But in 2013, Lehman had worked their way through various claimants, and I guess our file was at the top of the heap. And they contacted us, their counsel, and said, we'd like to talk about settlement. And I forgot what the initial figures were, but they were basically nothing. The initial offer.
Well, what they said to us originally, which turns out to be, well, it was they sort of lied to us afterwards. We asked him, well, look, are we talking about pennies on the dollar? And he says, no, we're going to give you, quote, 100 cents on the dollar. That lawyer was then taken off the case. We never heard from him again. And for essentially the next 6 years, all they did was lowball us and find different reasons to not pay the claim, saying that somebody else had bigger claims. And yet there was a specific amount of money in the BNC trust part of that big bankruptcy that we knew was available for settlement, but they wouldn't pay it. So Randy really worked hard. We had 3 separate mediations, long mediations. We had a mediator that worked on the case for 6 years. And it was just lowball, difficult problems until finally, about a year ago, they started to get serious and they came back to the table. But it settled relatively suddenly when I went back for my 3rd hearing in New York on the bankruptcy. They were trying to throw out another part of our case, which they'd already done. To be honest with you, the bankruptcy judge was pretty, she was favorable to Lehman. She wanted to get the case resolved. But the short of it is, we sat down and had a serious discussion, and suddenly, and to our happiness and kind of delight, we got the case settled for $5 million. $5 million in real dollars. The dollars have been paid, and this isn't bankruptcy money, and that's a lot of money to get out of a bankruptcy. So,
wow. The
only other thing I want to add to Randy's description of the case is not only does it involve sexual harassment and arbitration, but whistleblowers are in the news right now, and so these women are all that, and basically they're survivors. They persisted and to fight with this case for 14 years and hang in there. They're the real heroines of this case. Randy and I worked hard on it, but they did great work. And
yeah, well, can we hear a little bit about the effect that this had on those plaintiffs? Here they are trying to do a good job for Lehman Brothers, trying to catch these fraudulent loan applications. They're just trying to do their job, and then it all blows up on them. What kind of effects did that have on them?
Oh boy, it was a very difficult time for them. Like a lot of whistleblowers, unfortunately, when they stand up for what's right, when they complain about what's wrong in the workplace, they get nothing but trouble. And so that's exactly kind of what happened to them. But afterwards, they were kind of blackballed from the industry. All of them had a lot of difficulty in never getting jobs. None of them ever got the kind of jobs they had at that time. True, the recession didn't help any, and that made things worse. But they suffered not only from great financial loss, but the emotional distress that they suffered was very significant. They had depression. They went through divorces. Our first lead plaintiff, Colleen Colombo, not only went through divorce and lost her job, she lost her house, became totally broke, had to move back in with her aunt on a ranch in Oklahoma. That's not where she wanted to go. Took her 12-year-old daughter down there and just started working and living off the ranch. And really, it was just a very difficult time for her and all of our plaintiffs at every level you can imagine. And they really were real heroes to stay persistent through a lot of serious adversity.
Well, guys, thank you so much for the work that you do to help people. Thank you for telling us about the story that made a difference. I love how it touched so many important aspects of our society right now. It's a great example of the important work that plaintiff lawyers do and how important the contingent fee contract is for our 7th Amendment rights, because you are the keys to the courtroom, and your clients never would have got near a courtroom if not for your willingness to take those cases on and toil and sweat over them for almost 2 decades to get that result. So once again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us to hear Gary Gwilliam and Randall Strauss discuss their case that made a difference. To hear the full-length interview with more details, listen to Episode 4 of the How David Beats Goliath podcast. you'll hear about the 14-year investment of time and money that Gary and Randall made in that case and how they finally achieved justice for their clients. You can listen by clicking the link below or visiting howdavidbeatsgoliath.com and clicking on podcasts. To hear all my podcasts, subscribe by visiting iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher.
Thanks for watching. Send your questions or comments to Michael at mike@howdavidbeatsgoliath.com.